I just clicked full Osmo. Are we good to go? Ooh, do I need to have a sweater? Oh, jeez. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I look like I've got a giant scarf on, but this sucker is cozy. Okay, hello everybody. I think we're live, yes? Is it live or is it Memorex? I hope it's live because I'm here. I hope you're here with me. Welcome to another, supposed to be a Sunday night podcast, but due to the weather, we couldn't make it into the studio. I'm joking, of course we could, but we were downtown carousing in the snow. So we're doing a Plaid Avenger Monday night Plaidcast, and we're going to kind of pick up where we've been talking about for the last couple of Sundays. Have we done 2 or 3 of these at this point? I don't remember.
Number 3.
This is number 3 of 3,000. And so for those of you just tuning in, my name is Professor John Boyer, a.k.a. the Plaid Avenger. And I am a retired Virginia Tech professor and co-owner of Wine Lab here in Blacksburg, Virginia, home of Virginia Tech. And I'm welcoming, I hope, lots of former students, alumni, Hokie alumni, Hokie friends and family and parents from around the globe. We had a really nice international showing last week from folks from, 10 or 15 different countries around the globe. And so when we were chatting last week, I kept bringing up this concept of spheres of influence. And we had been talking about the Greenland grab that Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, was attempting to do. And that climaxed, perhaps, the first climax of the story with him threatening tariffs against all European countries that opposed him and threatening to take over Greenland by force, and therefore threatening the very stability of the entire Western alliance, specifically possibly threatening the very existence of a fantastically successful military organization called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Is that ringing a bell with anyone out there in podcast land? Is that what we were talking about last week? I think it was. And that ended up semi-resolving itself, at least for now, in that U.S. President Donald Trump suggested he would not use military force to take it over, and that perhaps they had a deal that they were crafting with NATO. I never saw that deal, by the way. Did anybody actually see what this deal ended up being? I don't really know. And so at the moment, there is no forward momentum for the United States of America to acquire by force other territory. And in describing this whole situation last week, it came up several times that I had said we're returning to a world in which the political structures are dominated by spheres of influence. And several folks on email hit me up saying, what exactly is that, Professor? So I'm choosing tonight's podcast, and I will try to keep it brief. I think we went 3 hours last week. I'll try to keep it brief, and then we'll pick up perhaps another night this week with some more details on this topic. I'll try to keep it to 45 minutes tonight, and you all will ask questions and initiate the next podcast that we'll do. And I'll even try to start recording some of these things. But I'm going to talk about spheres of influence tonight. Again, for those of you that know me or those of you that don't know me, Professor John Boyer, a teacher, a retired teacher, professor of World Regional Geography and of Geography of Wine and the upcoming Geography of Whiskey that I'll be putting on this very Plaidcast once I get a little bit more organized. Hopefully you'll be interested in those things and you'll hit me up and let me know. But we already have some comments here in the chat rooms from across the variety of mediums we are Plaidcasting on, including Twitch and Facebook and Instagram, and hell, I don't even know half of them anymore. I obviously don't do any of that hard work. That's Katie who sets all this stuff up. But from the chat room, I see Wabibi back in the hizzle saying, thoughts on recent ICE shooting? Not a whole lot of thoughts on that. Perhaps that's a separate podcast we do just on Where is America heading? Question mark. What political system is the United States transforming into? Question mark. That could be a podcast. Obviously, that it would be a hot button topic that will offend one or more political parties, because I will likely make fun of all of them. But the recent ICE shooting is out of my purvey of thoughts at the moment. I try not to comment about things that are that hot that have happened right this second. I like to pace my responses to see where things go, see how this falls out. And again, for those of you that don't know me, I'm here looking at the bigger picture. I am not a commentator that's getting on here to try to get you to like and click and donate. And it's going to throw titillating things at you, the crazy things, so that you'll clickbait or whatever the hell that's called. I'm not here for any of that. I'm here for the kind of longer term analysis. What's the general things going on here? What is this looking like for our country? How is this going to affect the globe? So the current ICE thing is a very domestic issue, and it's very hot. And I do not know where that's going yet, so I don't really have a comment on that. But thanks for tuning in, Wabibi. Perhaps, again, that's a separate podcast. Okay, to Hollinsworth 29. Good to see you back. Good to see you back, Hollinsworth. Let's see, Captain Spack Jarrow. That's a good one. Who says, I took your class in 2023. By the way, Katie, this is, it's scrolling to the newest one. So, maybe if I had to hold it there, maybe it's holding it now. Captain Spack Jarrow says, I took your class in 2023. I graduated. It's good to see you. I'm so glad you graduated, Captain Jarrow. I hope you're doing well. Wabibi says, I think Trump wants Greenland because he's aware of global warming and realizes minerals will be exposed. So he wants it for minerals, not just for geopolitical national security purposes. That perhaps is a whole nother podcast too, Wabibi, because, and I will, I'll elaborate a little bit more on that at this very precise moment before I get into tonight's lecture, because we did reference some of this stuff last week. And I think I also referenced a lot of those things are covered here in the Plaid Avenger #1 comic from like 15 years ago that talked about these very things happening in Greenland 15 years ago. So, Wabibi, that is kind of a common perception, and maybe it's even a perception by Donald Trump and his administration, that they're going to grow, they need Greenland to go in and grab a bunch of these rare earth metals and minerals, rare earth elements. And I would argue against that, mostly because there's nothing terribly rare about rare earth elements. I know that sounds weird, and that's all you've been hearing about on the radio ever since this whole Greenland grab situation has come up. But the metals and minerals that are in this rare earth elements category are actually not terribly rare. They're not like gold. They are all over the place on planet Earth, and strategically, from a business standpoint, they have to be in high enough concentrations in order to make it an economic activity worth doing. So the rare earths are not that rare; they're just not that concentrated, and there are concentrations of them all over the planet, but they also take a lot of time to process. In fact, there's nothing particularly rare about them. It's actually just really hard to process them into usable form. So you have to have an industry set up. You have to have all of your ducks in a row to have an industry that can do the mining, but also the processing to actually make these things worthwhile. Any country can do that. None of them are, except one, and that's China. China has threw a lot of eggs in the rare earths basket. Decades ago, at least a decade ago, maybe two. And so they have been setting up all sorts of manufacturing processing plants for rare earths, and they really have the market cornered on them right this second, not because they own or control all of the rare earth mines around the world. They don't. But they control the lion's share of the processing of rare earths around the world, and that's why they dominate. So I only wanted to point that out because I like people to understand the bigger picture. Yes, perhaps Donald Trump and his administration think that they need to grab Greenland because there's metal, rare earths there. That's fine. He could have grabbed it last week, and all those rare earths will be sitting in the ground in Greenland for another decade, because you have to build the industries to get them. And not on top of the processing industries you need. Greenland is pretty sparsely populated, and it's fairly tough geographic terrain. It's hard to get into the areas where all these rare earths are at. So already from the get-go, you can take Greenland tomorrow, but you then need to start building roads, and that's not easy on semi-permanent permafrost and or glacial ice. You can't just helicopter in and start a mining operation. You actually need infrastructure, need roads, and therefore you need people there, and therefore you need housing and hotels and electrical grids. And so you start to see where, going and grabbing a mine in the middle of Greenland. You know what? I'll make it even easier. It doesn't have to be rare earths. Say there's a really great gold mine in the middle of Greenland. Could be. Don't think so. Could be. Even something as simple as, gold, there's big chunks of it. We got to go get it because it's worth a lot of money. That already in the middle of Greenland is challenging. So simply getting this stuff is challenge one, and will take significant time to even get to build the infrastructure to get to these rare earths. Then you have to build the giant industry to process them. And so this is not, I don't believe that grabbing Greenland is done primarily for minerals. It's a long-term play, but you got a lot of work to get to that long-term benefit. And that could be started now. It doesn't even have to be started in Greenland. It can be started anywhere. So the Trumpies might think that's a big motivating factor for them, but they haven't played out the long game on that. That's not going to happen in his lifetime. Again, maybe they're saying, hey, strategically, we're looking at the long game. And we're going to talk about strategy tonight. That's the whole point. But that's not a short-term or even a 10-year realistic goal of you're doing it for minerals. It would be more logical to me to say that the Trump agenda for Greenland may be for oil, because there is something like 17 billion gallons of oil proven in Greenland and around the coastal areas of the Arctic. That is more strategically viable to get to that stuff, especially the stuff that's in the ocean bed. So that is a perhaps play. But really, what's motivating Donald Trump to take Greenland? That gets to what I'm going to chat about tonight. And you're going to hold me to it. It's 45 minutes. I'm already burning up on an hour if I start with 45 minutes from now. But hopefully that helps you, Wabibi. There are many reasons why Donald Trump perhaps wants to take Greenland. Minerals is kind of a low-hanging fruit that looks like a main one. It's not. If it's about resources, I actually would pick oil over the minerals. But I think it's about something much bigger called a sphere of influence. We're going to come back to that. Quixote in the House says the deal appears to be along the same terms that the U.S. and the Danes/Greenlanders have already had since the 1950s. Quixote is referencing the deal. We heard about a deal that Donald Trump was crafting with the head of NATO, and what Quixote is referencing is that there's already a strategic partnership that's been in place with Greenland and NATO and the Danes and the United States since World War II. And if you watched last week's podcast, we talked about that in some detail. So maybe Donald Trump saying we've struck a deal is him just now finding out that there was already a deal. Could be. And by the way, if there's any hardcore Trump fans out there in the hizzle, I hope you understand, I'm a fair broker. I've made fun of every president since I've been alive. I will make fun of Donald Trump as much as I made fun of Obama or anybody else. But don't tune out, all right? I try to make sense of the world without being a political operative for one party or the other. I'm actually not interested in domestic politics at all. So just because I poke a little fun, don't take offense to it. I'm not attacking you all outright. I'm not attacking your dear leader or whoever you love the most outright. I'm mostly looking at what's the bigger, grander strategy going on here and how do we understand it better. Let's see. Goya Gokau says, why has U.S. TFR not collapsed like in Europe slash Canada. What does TFR stand for? TFR. Why is US TFR not collapsed? US TFR collapsed like in Europe slash Canada. I'm not sure what that is, but we'll find out, Goya.
Total fertility rate or
total fertility rate. Ooh, good one.
that's my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good question, Goy. That's a whole nother podcast on population dynamics. Quick answer is that the United States is sitting very pretty on the world stage when it comes to demographics. And a lot of folks argue that demographics are, one of the major power sources on planet Earth. That is humans. Demographics is the study of humans. And total fertility rate refers to how many kids each woman has in each society. And Goya is very aptly pointing out that in Canada and many European countries, and these are all countries that are very rich, what we call fully developed, as a country gets richer and richer, women in general tend to have less children. And so that's why a lot of these populations are declining. They're literally getting smaller every year. Why has that not happened to the United States, Goya? Mostly because of immigration. And surprise, surprise, immigration's like huge in the news right now. It's a very big deal. And the current Trump administration is pretty hell-bent on stopping immigration. But immigration is one of the, if not the, primary reason why the United States' total fertility rate has held steady, and it's actually above what we call replacement level. So on average, I think in the United States it's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 children per woman, which is just slightly above the replacement level. If you go below 2 children per woman, that's actually a negative TFR, which means every year you'll have less people in your society. So the United States, unlike almost all other rich countries, Japan included, Australia included, New Zealand included, Singapore included. Who else could we throw in there? Russia, but for different reasons. Russian fertility rate has been sinking for decades. China actually does not have a very high TFR right now. In fact, China has a stabilizing and soon to be shrinking total population because their fertility rate is below 2. So the United States is very unique on the planet in that we're a really rich country, tons of resources, tons of stuff, tons of distance from other parts of the planet. The Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are some of the most valuable things for the defense of the United States that exist. And we have a very positive total fertility rate, which means we still have enough workers coming into the workforce to support people that are retiring and people getting old and dying. And that's really a significant component of a strong economy. And it's mostly because of immigration, which is now going to be changing. By the way, as immigration slows and or reverses in the United States, the total fertility will start to go down. And people are thinking about that, and people are worried about it, even in the Trump administration. So the Trump administration, which again is very anti-immigration, that's not a judgment call, just is what it is. They, maybe you've seen this, are very much about promoting young people, women, to have more kids. They are promoting and pushing anti-abortion. That's been a kind of a platform plank of the Republican Party forever, but they're strengthening the anti-abortion movement. And on top of that, they're encouraging higher fertility rates within younger populations. And I don't know the terms, but I know there's a lot of stuff happening with, what do you call it? It's like a conservative movement where women, they're encouraging old school lifestyles that women don't work. There's a term for it. I've seen it out there. And I'm like, oh, that's playing into the government trying to encourage higher fertility rate. It's like a lifestyle change. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's popular. It's out there. This is a phenomenon just in the last few years of women who want to resume a more traditional role. A trad wife? Is that it? Anybody? Trad something? Trad for traditional? Something of that nature. That's about...
Yeah, trad wife.
Trad wife. I got it in my own brain. Didn't even have to Google it. Trad wife. The trad wife movement is very much being promoted by the current administration to encourage higher fertility rate and population growth within the United States, since the current administration is taking away the increasing fertility rates that are due mostly to were due to immigration. Good question, Goya. I'm not sure I'm going to get to my presentation at all, which is fine. Hi, Kai Wen. Hi, Kai Wen says, thoughts on Xi Jinping's recent purge of high-ranking military officials. It's part and parcel for the Xi way. Maybe you know this already, Hi, but Xi Jinping just attacked or went after or has corruption charges against one of the most powerful military figures in the country, in China, that is. And this isn't the first merry-go-round for this. So Xi Jinping has been absorbing all power in the Chinese state. He will be the leader till he's dead. There's no way around it now. And that could be 5 years. It could be 50 years. Who the hell knows? But he holds all the cards in Chinese society. He ain't going anywhere. And anytime he feels threatened, anytime a powerful or popular leader arises in the ranks, he goes after them. So all you got to do is go Google AI, like, how many people have been fired under Xi Jinping's reign? You'll find a very long list. So it's how, dictators is too strong a word, but it's how strongmen, the strongman rule political process, where you have a very powerful leader who's like, I'm in charge and I'm going to take over everything. This is the playbook for that. And you can call him a dictator, you can call him a fascist leader. There's lots of names for this. And these names are being bandied around about Donald Trump, by the way. But it's a very standard playbook for the powerful strongman who gets in charge of the country, takes over the courts, will take over the press, will severely limit people's freedom of speech and or any ability for the public to even make fun of them. Xi Jinping did that years ago. Does anybody remember this from class when China passed a law banning Winnie the Pooh images because like humorists and comics and stuff were comparing Xi Jinping to looking like Winnie the Pooh, and strongmen, dictators, fascists don't like being made fun of, and so they just banned Winnie the Pooh. That's the kind of thing that strongmen rulers do, and regular purges of anyone who they think in the future might challenge their power. That's a regular part of the playbook for strongmen as well. Back to Spacjero, who says, what about things about Russian tankers being seized by the U.S. and now EU? That one's a more complicated question. I was going to do a whole podcast just on the power of oil. So I'm going to put that one on the back burner, Captain, and I'll come back to it maybe next week or week after when we talk about the role of oil in modern society, because it's being reformed big time right now. And I don't think enough folks are talking about how big an impact the current Trump administration is having on international energy policy. It's quite fascinating. So I kind of want to pick up the helm of that in a whole lecture. So I'll come back to that one. SPAC. Only here for the Plaidcast is back in the hizzle. Welcome back. Only here. Says, curious if anything stood out to you in Mark Carney's Davos speech. It was pretty awesome, actually. Who knew a Canadian prime minister would suddenly be a rising star on the international scene? It's shocking. I found interesting points in what he termed variable geometry. Oh, I didn't even get that far into the speech. Variable geometry. Bespoke coalitions of different countries, issue by issue, as opposed to so much focus on spoke and wheel organizations. Then again, I'm not totally up on my pros / cons to plurilateralism versus multilateralism. Those are all good questions, because what I want to talk about tonight is called spheres of influence, and that gets back to exactly what you're talking about with countries that are now working together on particular issues. They're doing that, and Carney and European leaders are probably pushing that because everybody sees the writing on the wall that we're moving towards something called spheres of influence, where three major power players are calling all the shots and everybody else has to get in line. And let's just go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. I think you probably know who I'm talking about. The major leaders that want to kind of historically rewrite and or redraw borders are, and in no particular order, Vladimir Putin of Russia, Xi Jinping of China, and right here, your homegrown favorite, Donald Trump of the United States. all of these folks are moving back into this direction. I call this podcast Back to the Future because we're going back in political theory to what's happening in the future. We're going backwards to do the spheres of influence in the modern era. So I'll come back to that in a second. Hoodie Jorg up in the Hizzle says, graduating in 2021. Good to see you. Took both world regions and intro to wine. Spheres of influence rings a bell. All right, it's going to ring more of a bell if I can get through these comments and actually start talking about it. Castle Guard, awesome. Says, good to see you, Boyer. Good to see the Boyer back streaming. I love it when my name becomes a noun. The Boyer. Thanks for that, Castle Guard. One of my questions is about if we think Trump will take similar action in Iran, what happened in Venezuela. No. Again, I'm just another talking head. But the Trump administration has a lot of balls in the air right now. They are juggling so many things, foreign and domestic. And Donald Trump, had a prime opportunity to do something in Iran 2 weeks ago when the Iranians killed 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 of their own citizens who were trying to overthrow the regime and maybe restore some element of democracy. So he had the window to do that and had the window to look cool and look important and look potent and powerful and change regimes, which he literally just did in Venezuela a month ago. But he didn't. And so my instinct is against them doing anything at this point. But who knows? He might have some secret surprise Maduro grab action getting ready to happen. I kind of doubt it, though. Venezuela was a much easier mark than Iran will ever be. Iran is not a small country. It is a highly educated and highly intelligent country. It has significant military forces. Venezuela has a big army, but of what? They've never been in a war. So the Iranians are much more hardened, seasoned, understand power politics, understand how to fight a war. Venezuela has never had any of that. So it's a much bigger proposition to try to strategically do anything in Iran. And again, he already missed a kind of an interesting window to do it. So my bet would go against it. That don't mean I'm right. Kevin Goins back up in the Hizzle. Welcome back, Kevin. Says, teach me, JB, share the knowledge. I'm working on it, Kev. Josh Willett says, replying to Kevin Goins, Boyer's the best. Took his class in 2016. 1 decade ago, Josh. Congratulations on our anniversary. Peter Rumdog says, haven't seen you since World Regions in 2016. Another decade graduate. Man, did I miss you. Much love. Thank you, Peter. Only here for the podcast as follow-up. Realized I should have said hub and spoke. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting turn of phrase there. Hub and spoke organizations. Quixote says, World Regions Fall 09. Checking in, BTW. Awesome. The Swamp Donkey says, welcome back, Swamp Donkey. Only Plaid Avenger could possibly say, what's TFR, then proceed to give a full-blown info session on it. Well played, sir. Thank you, Swamp Donkey. Let's see. Hollinsworth says, Trad Wife. Deer Dance came up with Trad Wives. Jack Sparrow says, besides Twitch, what platform is this streaming on? Katie already answered that. Let's see. Quixote came up with Trad Wives. Let's see. Katie, I'm guessing YouTube and Switch. Swamp Donkey says, I guess the opposite because people will see Plaid Avenger at the top of their phone when opening up Insta/Facebook. Hi Kawan remembers the Winnie the Pooh banning in China. Nicely played. Goya says Canada has high rates of immigration for decades, but very low birth rates. The only major difference I see between the U.S. and the rest of the world is the large number of religious conservatives in the U.S. Yeah, again, we can do a whole podcast just on this issue. Canada has had high rates of immigration, relatively speaking. Remember, Canada only has 30 million citizens. So even if they let in 1% or 2% or 5% of their total population in as immigrants, that's still not that many folks. Versus the United States with like 300 and what are we up to, 40 or 350 million citizens. So demographically, the U.S. is a powerhouse just from sheer size. And while Canada has allowed some immigration, again, relatively speaking, it's not a whole lot in raw numbers. That makes sense. And just like in the United States, there's actually been a lot of pushback about immigration in Canada. So for those that really don't like Donald Trump or think that the administration's the worst, and they're really upset about ICE, totally understand. The killing of U.S. citizens, problematic, but don't mistake the anti-immigration theme of Donald Trump and the current administration to be a standalone thing in the world. It gets significant play in virtually every rich country, and the anti-immigration stance is gaining a lot of traction in Europe. And Canada had a significant amount too, but Europe is really where a lot of folks are starting to vote more right-leaning or even right-wing political parties, and they're gaining traction because the same playbook that Donald Trump did is kind of beat the drum of immigration is bad and we need to stop immigration. Back to the chat room. Oh, I can barely read that. Blue Wolf X8 says, LOL audited back in 2006. Damn, couldn't get into the class, so just participated. Well, welcome back, Blue Wolf. I'm glad you participated and didn't get credit. I'll send you a comic book in lieu of a diploma. I'll send you a Plaid Adventure comic book since you audited. Just email me your address and I'll send you a comic book. And my email hasn't changed since you took the class in 2006. Let's see. Callista Malfoy's back. Awesome. Give it back, Malfoy. Upper End as well. It says Callisto. Swamp Donkey says, enough of us that they still stick his cameo in the music video for Shout in Lane Stadium. Oh, I have heard of that. I haven't seen it, but somebody told me I was on the big screen there once. Now that I'm retired, they probably will pull me from the big screen. Patrick Collins says, preach. I'm an 07 World Region alum. Been following ever since. A Real Human Being is back in the hizzle saying, good evening, Professor. Good evening, human being. And Billy Bob Hobnob is correcting me. Canada's population is currently 41 million. It's basically an exponent. The United States, I usually remember it because the United States total population is an exponent higher on average than the Canadian population. So back in the day when we had 350 million citizens, they had 35. So I guess even the United States probably is climbing closer to 400 at this point. While BB says, do you think Trump is trying to deport as many people as possible because AI will shortly take the majority of jobs in this country, which will force the government to give UBI payments to citizens? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That might be something that they've kind of dreamt up in their heads. I do not personally believe AI is going to be taking all the jobs. In fact, the problem with stopping immigration, and particularly immigration from south of the border, is that you're limiting workers who come for jobs that AI specifically will not replace. So anybody who's ever worked in the agricultural industry in this country, it's built on the back of immigrant labor. Every meat processing plant, be it cattle, be it pig, be it chicken, mostly immigrant labor. Construction, mostly immigrant labor. And again, this is not a judgment call on my part. Just go visit these things. Most restaurants, immigrant labor. And what's the common theme of all those things I just mentioned? AI ain't going to do shit in those industries. That's what it is. So we're in this kind of weird situation that we're deporting people who do jobs that are needed in the country and are the very jobs that will not be easy to replace by AI or even by the average American who makes too much money and has too comfortable a lifestyle to go pick cucumbers or strawberries or gut chickens or even work in construction. I mean, so much of construction used to be the backbone of especially younger Americans, where they would start as their first jobs, particularly male. And that is overwhelmingly being taken over by immigrant labor just because most Americans, even young ones, don't want to do it. And again, not a judgment call. I'm not making a case for stopping, Donald Trump's ICE movement. I'm not here for political debate. I'm just suggesting it's a little counterproductive, what's happening in the bigger picture. And I'm not sure that all those folks have thought it through. And most of the jobs that AI are going to replace are going to be, I don't know, accountants and maybe, not lawyers per se, not courtroom lawyers, but a lot of the folks that work in legal or work with data or work with this or computer programmers. Those are the jobs that are likely going to be pinched by artificial intelligence. And those are jobs that, by and large, these are generalizations, but they're true. By and large, all of those jobs are not done by immigrants. So, cleaning offices, picking vegetables. There's a long list of things that are not going to be replaced by AI that are kind of done mostly by immigrant labor. So I'm not sure if I follow you on that one, Wabibi. Captain Sparrow says, Jero says, sometimes I need to search up what these TLAs people mentioning are. Real Human Being says, I don't think AI will be taking too many jobs. I actually don't think so either. Have you seen people struggling at self-checkouts?
Yeah.
Self-checkouts is
I'll
hilarious.
respond to that question. One from Native Selections.
Native Selections.
That took geography of Southeast Asia and world regions in 2007.
Wow. Geography of East Asia and what world regions in 07?
Yep.
Oh, well, welcome back, Native
They're on
Selections.
Instagram.
Oh, okay, well, I can't see. Oh, I see.
No,
Oh, I
you
do have.
can't. You don't see those.
I can't see
Only
Instagram.
on the iPad. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, what was the question?
Nothing.
Oh, just a shout out. Okay. Well, welcome, Native Selections. Let's see. Billy Bob says Trump is amazing. Who else could piss off Canadians, Mexicans, and get our products boycotted by Europeans? Well, he's nothing if not international. Blue Wolf says, is there any realistic threat from Italy? Sorry, no offense to my Italian friends, but a threat from Italy just makes me, I don't know, that tickles me. The threats from Italy. The spaghetti wars. I don't know what the threat from Italy would be. But back to your question. Any realistic threat from Italy / greater EU to close U.S. bases? Okay, that might be a threat from Italy. If the U.S. went after Greenland, and is it a greater win for Russia or China? Ooh, that is a tough one. And now we're getting to grand strategy that I only have 20 minutes for this lecture for, but I'll do it. Yeah, I don't. Again, now that Trump has backed away from the military grab of Greenland, all of the threats about tariffs and counter tariffs and bazooka tariffs out of the European Union, and the threat of closing military bases, all that's off the table for now. So there's no sense really speculating about it. The speculation about who is happier about the Trump administration's current foreign policy, who's happier about that foreign policy, China or Russia? That is a toss-up. That is a very big toss-up, and that brings me back to what I was going to chat about tonight. That is spheres of influence. So what am I talking about already? That why would China and Russia be happy about what's going on? Oh, because we are moving towards a world that we have not seen for some time. Namely, we haven't seen this for, well, call it 100 years. But it's better to say 80, because World War II was kind of the final battle for spheres of influence. And before, I even get to specific historical shout-outs, why would I talk about a sphere of influence? Who was in charge and trying to influence different areas of Europe? Well, you heard of the guy. His name was Hitler. Hitler and many folks before him in human history have said, here's our state and we want more. Here's where we are and nobody should mess with us because we're sovereign, or we're just powerful enough to repel you. But we think for our own security or for our own economic gain that we shouldn't control just this little state that we're in. We think we should control more. In fact, there's an area around us that we will define, and that's our area. We may not even outright possess it, but you should all understand we're a power player in this part of the world. And so you shouldn't mess with us. If you mess with us, you're going to get the horns. You're going to get the Hitler horns. But also, you probably shouldn't mess in our immediate neighborhood because we either claim that outright or we think that nobody else should mess with it but us. That's what a sphere of influence is. And so I say the last time the world lived by this concept that there are major powers, and major powers control not just their territory, but other areas outside their territory, and that all of the powerful entities recognize each other's powers and agree to not mess with each other. The last time that happened was World War II, and now you're leading up to World War II. It was World War I, and even before that, we live in a world that was largely might makes right. You have a powerful army, a powerful navy, a powerful country, a powerful leader, and if anybody tries to mess with your territory, you will defend it successfully, and or you will expand it successfully. That was the only true test of real sovereignty for most of human history. And you could see that back from empires of old, the Roman Empire, the Yuan dynasty of China, the Mongol Empire, Mesopotamian Empire, the Assyrians. There are different major power players throughout all human history that rise when they get really strong, and they actually shrink when they get weak. Just to pick on a couple, China has expanded greatly and contracted over hundreds of years multiple times. Russia was a little province of Nowheresville in the 14th century, and it grew and expanded and expanded and expanded. It took over a whole continent, owned all of Central Asia, owned all of Eastern Europe, owned Alaska, and then it crashed and burned and it shrunk. And so these are good examples of entities in history and even now who have said, hey, when we're strong enough to flex, we might expand our sphere of influence to a greater neighborhood. And when we're really weak, it collapses and we can only control this little area here. So this is kind of part and parcel of how human history has worked from the Roman Empire right on up to World War II. And it was at that point where the world's like, holy crap. We can't afford to keep allowing very powerful entities to rise and try to take over other areas in their spheres, because it leads to gigantic conflict with gigantic death tolls. So that's why, since World War II, we created the United Nations. I say we, humans, created the United Nations and all these international organizations to try to foster economic development, but also peace and negotiations and treaties to kind of try to make a world in which might didn't make right anymore. And that world lasted a pretty decent run from 1945, and I'm calling the book in 2025 till just last year. Up for 45 to 2025, the world played by this international set of rules that everybody agreed, hey, no one is allowed just to go beat the shit out of your neighbor or go expand because you can or just go grab a piece of territory because you're strong enough. We all agree to an international set of norms, an international set of rules and regulations that we all agree to respect each other's sovereignty as it sits here at the end of World War II. Everybody has their little territory and we all respect each other's territory and no one's taking over anybody else's territory. When people did, it was a big deal. And I pointed this out last week. The main one that I always think of is Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein in the 90s just woke up one day and said, you know what? I think we own Kuwait. We used to own Kuwait. Our empire used to own Kuwait, and Kuwait's got a bunch of oil, and we're taking over Kuwait. And you know what? Nobody can stop us because Kuwait is weak compared to our army. And that was true. And so Iraq rolled into Kuwait and took it over. But that's not the end of the story, well, was it? Because the rest of the world said, hey, dude, you're breaking the rules. No, we all agree you can't do that. And if we allow one country who's powerful enough to go take over their neighbor, we're opening up the genie out of the bottle again for everybody to go beat the shit out of their neighbor because they can. And that's a world we've been trying to prevent since World War II. And so when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and somebody goes, math check me on that, was that in 94? It was a big deal. And the world responded. No, I think the first Bush that was 92. I think Bush 1 was in. He's the one that countered Saddam Hussein. So the international system prevented a lot of these smaller wars for a good long time. And everybody agreed to this system, which 1990. First Bush administration. So 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait. And the world reacted. And the world said no. And the world, led by the United States, built a coalition of other countries saying, nope, can't do that. And they went and liberated Kuwait. Right? That's the way it's been. but that's not the way it was before 1945, and now it appears that's not going to be the way it is anymore since 2025. And this is because of one U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, again, I'm not a hater. I ain't a lover, and I ain't a hater. And I actually don't care about politics at all. I want you to understand what's going on in the bigger picture here. And so when I say we're going back to the future, we're actually returning back to how things were for most of human history, right on up to World War II. Again, it's shocking for us because we've all been alive since World War II. Our entire existence has been within a framework of international law and order that says, no, you can't just go invade countries. And U.S. President Trump does not believe that anymore. Not a judgment call for Trump fans. This isn't a judgment call. He's very open about it. Thus the Greenland grab. Thus grabbing Maduro out of Venezuela. So my question tonight is, what is the grand strategy here? If we are indeed returning to spheres of influence where very strong powers control their state and peripheries around their state, what is the current U.S. Trump administration thinking of what are we doing this for? Are we doing this for economic reasons? Are we doing this for strategic long-term economic reasons? Are we doing this for defense reason? Are we doing this because we don't feel safe? Because that's why in the past, countries would exert influence around their edges. Russia in particular has lived in mortal terror its entire 7 centuries of existence, maybe 6 centuries of existence. Russia has lived in mortal terror of defending its borders. It is always pushed out further from its borders, outside of its current state, to the periphery, to a sphere beyond their Russian state, in order to, and they do it all openly, to say, hey, we do not have very strong land borders. It's a lot of flat land. Russia's easily invadable. And so they worry perpetually about security. So everything the Russians do is for self-defense and security. That's what motivates them. So I've been looking at what the Trump administration is doing, saying, what's their grand strategy here? It doesn't, so far there doesn't appear to be a lot of consistency. What the current administration has been doing is best described as either transactional, is a term you hear thrown around a lot, or I would actually also call it perhaps realpolitik. I don't know if you've heard of realpolitik. And again, for those of you, most of you are graduates, most of you are well-seasoned, international, well-read people who probably know all these terms, but for those of you that don't, President Trump is often called transactional. And transactional politics, and we're talking mostly about foreign policy. I'm not talking about economic or domestic stuff. But transactional foreign policy is really a series of like business-like bilateral deals that are about now. What can I get now? I'm going to give you something. You're going to give me something. That's transactional. I want this, so and I will give you this. If you give me that, I will give you this. If you give us Greenland, I'll stay in NATO. That's transactional. There are things, tangibles, that are going to be traded or given for something to happen. Brokering. And again, President Trump really fancies himself as like the penultimate business person. So that makes sense that he's a very transactional president, because he's always thinking in terms of real estate or economic things and trade and all this stuff. And I think can you still see me? Mm-hmm. The camera just went off here. I can't see myself on the screen anymore. I don't know if people can still hear me. I don't know. Am I still there? Can anybody still see me? I'll taking a TV timeout. Okay. Blue Wolf says we still have audio. Can hear you, but the video went off. Or maybe that thing's dead, or this thing's dead. What's taking the screenshot? That thing? Yes. Huh. Okay. Did it just time out? You just have to click it back on? We're working on it. I see. I'm reading your comments, Sean and Dee and Hallie, and I can recognize these names. And Candy Hill Williams, I know that name too. Let's see. Kyoto says we can still hear. Hi, Kawan. Cameron Neal's in the hizzle. We're trying to fix the video. Hey, there's some video. Oh, what is that? That's his. Oh,
I don't know why it's like
that's hilarious. Wow. Now I look like Max Headroom. Oh!
Okay, I think we're back.
Do you think it just like timed out? Maybe that camera just it wasn't moving since it's not recording. It might just been a timeout feature. It's been on. Well, it's been on. That's funny. It's been on for almost exactly an hour.
Can everybody else see?
Okay, can you see me now? Max Headroom is back in the hizzle. Okay, cool. All right, let me finish this up because the camera might be dying again. And D Scar says Katie is still cuter. Absolutely correct, D. Extra bonus points for you. Extra credit, as we used to say back in the day. Okay, now back to what I was just ranting about. President Trump is very transactional, likes to make deals, even in politics and in defense and in international relations. And what's important about this is that it prioritizes immediate gain, say immediate national interest. We need something right now, so we're going to do this right now. It's mostly economic things are in the trade, sometimes defense and military. And they're very tangible. You can win. You're going to winning because we're getting something and getting something done. This is the opposite of long-term diplomacy, by the way. And it replaces values-based multilateral diplomacy with what we call quid pro quo. Again, you give me something, I give you something. We're doing this exchange, usually economic. This is what tariffs are all about. Donald Trump is using tariffs as I'll take the tariffs away if you give me what I want. So again, very transactional, and it's not about long term. You have to keep in mind with everything that the Trump administration is doing, it all looks very short term. It's a short term advantage. It's a short term win. But what are they getting out of this in the long run? I'm not sure I understand. I'm not sure the Trump administration understands. And so the other main thing is the United States and most countries, for most of their history, the United States for all of its history up until right now, doesn't really use transactional politics because the United States and many other countries have values that they base their long-term strategic planning on. Namely, in the United States' case, is the United States, for virtually all of its history, promoted democracy, human rights, liberal values, and again, free markets and democracy. These are concepts, these are values, these are ideas. And the United States, for all of its history, has based its strategy and its transactional policies on what's the greater strategy here. The greater strategy is based on our values. This is what we want in the long run. So this is what we're going to promote in the world, and that will affect the transactional stuff we do. Whereas the Trump administration has not really outlined any kind of long-term objectives at all. In fact, they've been quite open about, no, we're just doing this thing right now. Okay, well, what do you want in the long run? Doesn't matter. This is what we're doing right now. Okay. And by the way, I also dropped this other term called realpolitik. Ends with a K. Real and then politik with a K at the end. That's more of it's a pragmatic approach to foreign policy and statecraft that prioritizes national interest and power dynamics over ideology and morality and all these other things. So I just said the United States mostly uses its values-based system to make decisions, short-term and medium-term and longer-term decisions, uses values to dictate how it's going to make these decisions. Realpolitik is kind of more the Trump way, and America has done realpolitik in the past. Henry Kissinger was a big famous guy for realpolitik, and it's much more pragmatic. And the Trumpies, if anything else than transactional, to me, they're realpolitik, which is they're saying realpolitik says, yeah, it's nice to have values. and it's nice to try to do the right thing. But the reality is there's bad actors in the world. And sometimes you got to do bad shit to get what you want. Sometimes you have to, sometimes the United States has to support overthrowing a democratically elected leader in Chile because that, even though it's bad and against our values, that's what's good for us in the long term. So it's very, again, pragmatic is the term. It emphasizes making decisions based on concrete, practical reality, stuff we need right now, over top of or superseding theoretical, ethical, values-based stuff. So transactional, realpolitik, I won't say they're the exact same thing. They have different approaches. Transactional is much more immediate, very short term. Realpolitik is more of a long-term way that you look at the world. The United States has employed realpolitik in the past when it had to, or sometimes when it didn't. But in general, the United States has been much more of a values-based, long-game strategy of, well, here's what we're going to promote. And yeah, we've fallen off the path and done some bad stuff. But in general, we mostly make our decisions based on our value system. Okay? Now, that's one thing. All right? That's a way to define, I think, the way the Trump administration is interacting with the world right now. Transactional, realpolitik. And Donald Trump, again, is very good at this. He's just like, hey, we got the strongest military. We ain't got to do nothing. We don't need a part of NATO. We don't need you. You need us. Hey, that's as real as it gets, man. That's realpolitik. And he'd say, and because of that, we don't have to care. We're going to take Greenland. That's what's different about Trump. It's not that we've not done realpolitik before, but usually it's been real and you don't have to speak it. So prior administrations have said, hey, we know that we're more powerful than NATO. We know NATO needs us more than we need them. But our values-based system that we use for our long-term strategic planning suggests that we shouldn't piss off our NATO friends. We shouldn't just grab territory. That doesn't fit our long-term strategic values-based decision-making. Trump is like, nope, don't care about the long-term stuff. And I'm not basing my decisions on values, morals, or ethics. I'm basing them on real things that we want that I think will make the country stronger and better right this second. By the way, if I, at any given point, I sound like I'm supporting the Trump administration, or if it sounds like I'm immediately attacking the Trump administration, try to keep in mind, I am neutral. I'm trying to describe how the world is working and trying to figure out myself how this seems to be playing out with how folks in the current administration make decisions. Okay? So the Trump administration, here's a few other kind of terms to think about this. The Trump administration has been using a whole lot of tactics. A lot of great tactical maneuvers have happened in the last year. And I say great, impressive tactical maneuvers. But tactical things are not strategic things. And so those are two other terms you should try to understand and think about when you're reading the news. What's the difference? Tactical, again, it's immediate. It's a thing that happened right now. I'm doing this right now. A tactical strike. And a very good example of that would be what the United States did invading Venezuela on a covert military operation and getting the president and the first lady of Venezuela not only out, but with 0 deaths from the United States military side, minimal casualties even in the Venezuela side. That was a bizarrely successful tactical move. Okay? Tactical, a thing we just did. Strategy is something different. So tactical moves, strategic moves. Tactical is immediate. Strategic is long-term. Again, kind of getting back to what I was talking about with values-based strategic decision-making in the past, strategies are long-term. What is the goal we're trying to get to in 10, 20, 50, 100 years? The strategy is the path. Tactics are what you do to stay on that path, to move you forward on a path. Here's the best example I can think of to define the terms, because they are very different things. Tactically, the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor in 1941, tactically brilliant. In one day, they sank virtually all of one of the mightiest military's defenses in the Pacific Ocean. And the Japanese were saying, this is a tactic we're using because our long-term strategy is to control this half of the Pacific and to keep the United States out of the war. So we're going to do this tactical strike because our strategy is to show them that we're a world power and that you better not mess with us. Now, is that how it worked out? It was a brilliant tactical strike. It was a terrible strategy because a wildly successful tactical strike on Pearl Harbor, 4 years later, the Japanese were bombed into submission and the entire country was ruined. 4 years. So they had a strategy in mind and they employed a tactic which wildly backfired on them. They had a great tactic, terrible strategy. Now we can bring it back. Okay, what's going on in today's world? We see all kinds of interesting and sometimes impressive tactical moves by the Trump administration in the news. Again, grabbing Maduro out of Venezuela. If indeed Donald Trump would have ended up grabbing Greenland militarily. You've got tactical wars like Russia invading Ukraine. That one should have been a quick war, but tactically they couldn't even pull off the short-term tactical part right, which is why it's turned into a much larger, nastier, deadlier war. But Russia said, no, we're tactically going to take this. Even the Chinese military buildup in a place called the South China Sea, which if you took my class, some of you probably remember this. These countries, these powerful countries, are using tactics to get what they want. But what I'm trying to impart here as I'm wrapping up this already too long lecture is countries use short-term tactics in order to achieve a long-term strategy. What is the current Trump administration's long-term strategy? What is the United States doing here long-term? That we do not know about. These are questions that we should be asking. And again, it's just easy to kind of make fun of any U.S. president, Trump or otherwise, but it doesn't look like any of us in America understand what the U.S. strategy here is. We understand the tactics. Okay, you're grabbing that, you're doing this. Okay. For what end? What's the long-term strategy? Most Americans don't know. I don't know. Most Americans don't know. Most Europeans don't know. Most of the world at this point doesn't know. And I'm actually not sure the Trump administration knows either. There you go. That was the little dig. That's just a little dig right there. I'm trying to challenge the Trump administration. Like, come up with some long-term thinking here. What's going on? And perhaps they're wildly smarter than me. And Pete Hegseth is a hidden genius, and he already has a long-term strategy, and they're playing it right to plan. I kind of don't think so. These folks don't really appear to be long-term strategists, at least not yet. And the tactics they're using don't have any real rhyme or reason. So what I'm assessing is the word of the day, the phrase of the day, which is, I don't think there is a very well-defined Trump foreign policy. And I don't believe that the administration has a lot of really firmed-in long-term strategic goals. But if you look at the tactical things they're doing, it really looks like we are returning to power politics of the past, and that gets back to spheres of influence. And I already kind of set this in motion about 10 minutes ago. Before there was the modern world, before there were treaties, before there were international organizations, there were thrones, and there were warlords, and there were empires. And the way that those folks controlled their territory and or expanded their territory was by sheer force. Might makes right. Empires don't need permission to do things. They don't go through international bodies. If they have long-term strategies, it typically would have been based on 1, defend the empire, 2, expand the empire. And again, strategies don't have to be complex. That's your strategy. There you go. Now you can kind of put things in order of how you achieve those long-term strategies. So you got anywhere from the Assyrians, again, to the Mongols, to the Roman empires, and even the Chinese government and the Russians, which I've suggested already, have grown wildly and shrank wildly in the past, depending on how well their long-term strategies have played out and how powerful they are at the time. But this situation changed really just in the last 100, you can now call it 120, 130, 140 years, because in the world of spheres of influence where major powers with major militaries kind of take what they want and the rest of those weaker countries be damned, that's a constant state of war. You're always defending from your neighbors, and your neighbors get stronger than you, and then they come and beat the hell out of you, and they take the territory, and then you get a little stronger, and a decade later, and you go beat the hell out of them. So you want the spheres of influence is very transitional. It moves a lot and sometimes very quickly, and when they move, it's very violent. So other powers, the strong powers back in the day who created these spheres of influence, this is when the globe came kind of fully connected. So the Roman Empire, you know where the Roman Empire was. That was in the Mediterranean. And the Chinese Empire, where's the Chinese Empire? In China. And the Russian Empire, where's it? It's in Russia. It's the Europeans that kind of started the trend of, we're going to go out to the rest of the world and take over chunks of it. And now we're the British at one point were the most powerful naval military on planet Earth. And they had territory all over the place. And they would say, this is our sphere of influence. Us, our homeland, and all the places we own everywhere else is our sphere of influence. Don't mess around. Don't mess with it. And by the way, France, you're the other major power. You don't mess with our stuff, and we won't mess with your colonies in the Caribbean. Now, again, that sounds nice, and that does, at some level, ward off internal smaller conflicts. If the powers who are in these spheres are strong enough to defend their own states and to defend the periphery around their states, that does create a sense of stability. Because major powers are like, well, we don't like the French, and I would like that piece of territory they have, but if we go over there, they're going to beat the hell out of us. They're stronger than us right now, so chill. And big powers don't want to lose, so they will tend to respect other powers that are equal or greater than them. And again, that does create a sense of stability for a while. However, in a globalized, colonized world, which had competition for resources and for colonies and for territories all over the planet, and again, we're talking about from 1492 when Columbus sailed all the way up to the 1600s, the 1700s, the European powers are grabbing territory everywhere, and it just sets a chain reaction in motion. It's inevitable that all these powers with all their stuff are going to keep bumping up against each other and causing constant war, which we did. And then it got even worse because you can think about all the colonial wars in the past that happened in the Americas, and across Africa, and in India, and the Brits and others even invaded China at various points in the mid-19th century. So those conflicts are always kind of roiling in the background. And then you get into the 1900s, and you get to even the late 1800s and the 1900s, where we now live in an industrialized world. An industrialized world that can make weaponry beyond the pale of killing people from anything in the past. And you have an interconnected transportational and communications world, which these empires can now have their soldiers all over the planet with some of the most lethal stuff that our species has ever come up with at scale, and powerful armies, powerful weaponries spanning the globe. And these spheres of influence are now up against each other all the time. And we have a couple of world wars in which, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people die because these powerful entities are duking it out. And it's at that point with the lethality, the connected world and the lethality of our weapons is when, after World War II, everybody said, oh, we should stop doing this. We should probably calm this on down. And it's at that exact point where you have international institutions like the United Nations and NATO and the Warsaw Pact and the Yalta Conference, which ended World War II. And that's when the Soviet Union got together with Great Britain and the United States. And they said, okay, here's how the world's going to work. We, the Western Alliance, this is our territory. You, the communists, that's your territory. And now we're in a Cold War. Even that, my friends, doesn't that even kind of sound like a sphere of influence where we said, we, a collection of nations, said, this is our stuff. Don't mess, Russia, Soviet Union, don't mess around over here. And Russia was like, you guys don't mess around over here. We own Eastern Europe now. Don't mess around. That was what sustained stability during the Cold War. Because otherwise, had either those two big entities gone against each other, it would have caused World War III with now atomic and nuclear weaponry. We'd all be dead right now. So even that, which still is a semi kind of a sphere of influence between the Western sphere and the Eastern Bloc, still kind of a sphere of influence, but they battled it out for influence across the rest of the world. So that's why you have all kinds of wars, proxy wars, we call them, in the Middle East, proxy wars in Africa, proxy wars in Southeast Asia. I don't know, you probably heard of something like the Korean War or the Vietnam War. So even under that sphere, there was still conflict, but it was much more limited because the big dogs did not want to challenge each other for fear it would spiral out of control into complete and utter world conflict, which nobody really wants. Until now. Because now we do seem to be getting back to that era of, hey, you know what? We're a really powerful state. We don't need any international organizations. We don't need any allies. And we are not only powerful enough to maintain our territorial integrity if anybody attacks us, we're powerful enough to take more should we see fit. Hey, is this starting to sound familiar in current events? I bet it does. We can look at Vladimir Putin's Russia, a territory that expanded from the 13th and 14th centuries to take over most of Eurasia, and at its height, after World War II, controlled all of Eastern Europe, all of Central Asia, and then it is still the largest country on planet Earth, but it collapsed. And now we have a Putin who says, well, it collapsed because we were weak, but I would like to get strong and get that back again. And what has he done? Started a war in Ukraine. So we can now look at this and go, Putin is in charge of one sphere, and Putin says, hey, Russia is our core, but all of former Russia historically used to be ours, and we think it should be ours, and at the very least, nobody should mess with it. So we don't want any Western influences in our sphere of influence. What's his sphere? Right now it's Eastern Europe, Central Asia, maybe parts of the Middle East. And this will help you understand what has fueled Vladimir Putin and maybe Russia in general's rage against the expansion of NATO. There are a lot of Russian apologists, the Kremlin itself, but a lot of even U.S. scholars are kind of Russian apologists, and they say the only reason why the U.S. and Russia don't get along is because the U.S. has been encouraging NATO to grow. The U.S. has been encouraging the Baltic states like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland to join the EU and to join NATO. And that feels threatening to Russia because that's their sphere of influence, and they don't want people messing around in their sphere. Does that help you understand Vladimir Putin's current motivations? Europe, many Europeans are genuinely worried, saying, well, if Vladimir Putin's ambitions come true in Ukraine and he takes over Ukraine, that's just one state in his imagined sphere of influence, and what will stop him from taking back all of Eastern Europe? Will he stop if he gets Romania back, Bulgaria back, Poland back, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania? By the way, he'll start with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Will he attempt to take Kazakhstan back? These are interesting questions, and that will help you understand Vladimir Putin World leader number one, who's returning to a sphere of influence mode. This is our state. Don't mess with it, and don't mess with the areas around us that we think are rightfully ours, either for economic reasons or for military self-defense reasons. We feel like no one should mess over here. And Putin's Russia has been mightily mad that NATO has encroached on what they see as their sphere of influence, bringing Western alliance military weapons into areas that they used to personally control. That bothers them. Remember an hour ago when I said one of Russia's primary motivations, its entire country's history, is defense. They live in mortal fear of being invaded by all sides because it's a strategically hard place to physically defend, because it's one big-ass flatland. You don't have any good mountain ranges keeping people out, and it's a really big country, and Russia doesn't have a particularly large population, so it's hard to defend a giant state when you don't have that many people and don't have natural defenses. That's Vladimir Putin's sphere of influence, according to him. Xi Jinping is our second player in the game. Xi Jinping, ruler of China. We already talked about him at the beginning of the hour. Not only does he want to see China return to its former state of glory as one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful state on planet Earth, but they want control of their territory, and they want their sphere of influence to be perhaps Southeast Asia, perhaps Japan someday. They certainly want to take Taiwan back. There's no mistaking they have every ambition to grab Taiwan back. And Taiwan is part of something, for those of you that took my class back in the day, maybe you remember some of these terms. Taiwan is just the first island of interest for the Chinese, because they actually have something called the island chain theory. Island chain defense, island chain theory, I've heard it called lots of things. And that is, they strategically, they say, it's our sphere of influence is China proper, Central Asia perhaps, Southeast Asia for sure, but also this line of islands off our coast. Taiwan is in the first island chain, and we think that no boats or anybody should mess anywhere within the first island chain without asking our permission. But they actually have a second island chain, and that one goes further out, or maybe over to the Philippines, all the way up to Japan. And they say, that's our second island chain. We actually don't think anybody should mess even in this larger area. And there's a third island chain that goes all the way to Hawaii. And so China's ambition, and this is stated, this is again not theoretical, not Western analyst or me sitting around dreaming this up. This is written. They're like, no. You know, this half of the Pacific is China's sphere of influence, and no one should mess in it. I mean, we'll let you drive boats through it, but you should ask our permission. And you might could drive military airplanes through it, but you should ask our permission. By the way, the United States regularly defies this and flies planes and boats all the time in this area and doesn't ask permission. So that's China's sphere of influence. They want Taiwan back. They want to expand their maritime control into one, first island chain, second island chain, and then it's a little fuzzy how much of the rest of the Pacific they think should be theirs. They believe all of the South China Sea should be theirs, and they've been building military bases. They've been building islands down there to claim that as their territory. And they also have something else you might have heard of called the Belt and Road Initiative, the Silk Road Initiative. And that is that they have been expanding their influence, not so much military strong power, expanding their influence in a giant economic development scheme to tie in as many countries as possible all across Eurasia and even into Africa. And so they've been building roads and river systems and canals and building ports, all in the Pacific Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, and again, even connecting up the old Silk Road from China to Europe, in an effort to make them the epicenter of an economic empire, which they've been doing quite well at. China's got lots of issues, by the way. So Russia and China both have tons of issues. So don't let my words suggest that I think they're winning. All these countries have a lot of challenges, but I'm just now explaining the sphere of influence. Xi Jinping of China says, China's back, China's China, China's ours. And so is the surrounding area. And now we come to one Donald J. Trump. And I don't need to tell you what he's been doing. But grabbing the oil in Venezuela, okay, no one's done that before. Well, not for a long time. The United States has a long history of territorial acquisitions that we talked about last week, grabbing or buying whole chunks like the Louisiana Purchase, all the way up to the Mexican secession after the U.S.-Mexican War of the southwestern part of the United States, to grabbing Caribbean islands or buying Caribbean islands. We bought the Virgin Islands from the Danes. So Trump is in the same kind of mode that we've just not seen for a long time. It's not unheard of. He is approaching the world much more like Xi and Putin and less like his American predecessors. And so that perhaps helps you understand in his transactional realpolitik world that taking Greenland is like not a big deal to him. It's like, no, we can and we should. And we, the United States, and this is Trump's words, not mine, and I'm making this up, but my instinct is that Trump is looking at this very transactional and realpolitik and saying, no, this is our sphere of influence. China, I got it. You want Taiwan back? Probably. Russia, you want Eastern Europe back? That would have been unthinkable 5 years ago, but now maybe the United States will say, fine, take Ukraine. Because what the Trump administration expects in return is that Russia and China won't mess in their sphere of influence. So again, you see, you're pulling it back to the broader picture. You've got three main powers that are the most powerful countries, at least militarily, on planet Earth. And they are flexing back to the old way of things, which is might kind of makes right, but we don't want to be going up against each other because we're all such lethal powers, it will be World War III and the whole world will die. So just short of saying might makes right and there's no rules at all, the spheres of influence model suggest, hey, we all recognize that us three are the most powerful. Let's also recognize that we have our peripheral spheres of influence, other places that aren't the United States that we don't want Russia and China messing in. And China has the same thing. Got it? We're China. We don't want you messing within our first island chain. We don't want you messing in the South China Sea. We think that's ours. Okay. And Russia, of course, is like, and we would like back everything we lost during the Soviet Union. It's a mutual respect that is not just about the countries. It's about the wider sphere of influence around those countries. And to me, I feel like that's what we're seeing, obviously from Russia and China. They make no bones about it. We're also now seeing this from the United States under the Trump administration. And this is what seems discombobulating and confusing to us because our country's never operated that way before. At least not in your lifetime and not in my lifetime either. Remember, the United States was one of the main players that built the very international system of rules and regulations that the world has run by since 1945. And so it's intriguing and weird and off-putting and confusing that the United States built a system that was very successful for it, and now that their very same country is disbanding that international system that it created. Does that make sense? What is it being abandoned for? Perhaps, this is all theoretical, but perhaps for this sphere of influence model. It's the way that humans have operated for most of human history, and it appears that we're moving back in that very direction. Does that make sense? Does that make sense of the world? Because I look at that, I like to talk about things like this so that I better understand when I see things unfolding. I never get surprised too much. Even Donald Trump's moves have not terribly shocked me too much. The domestic things are a little shocking to me. The foreign policy, not so much. Knowing how he operates mentally, knowing about his transactional nature as a business person, knowing that it is a reality that the United States has the most powerful military. He is just taking these facts and he is using these tools of the United States to do things very differently than anybody has done for at least a century. Does that make sense? And I never get surprised. I'm like, yeah, well, of course. I mean, I'm actually surprised that the Greenland thing didn't already happen because the United States never has to put a boot on the ground in Greenland. The United States could literally just make a statement saying Greenland is ours. And we're going to start moving. We're starting to build military bases. We're just telling you it's ours. We're just saying it. We're not going to shoot anybody. We're not even going to send soldiers. We're just telling you it's ours. And now we will start sending our oil companies or military bases to start new bases. And we're just not going to ask permission. So we just want to let you know we're going to start doing things as if it's ours. And that's that. That's a simple statement, and that's all it would take. And then it would be up to the Danes or other European powers to say, well, then we're going to send in troops to try to attack you. It's not going to happen. So again, I'm not defending any of this. I'm surprised that the Greenland thing didn't already happen, and I actually predict that what I just explained likely will happen in the future. But I hope I'm wrong, because there are some big negatives to this strategic avenue that the three big powers are going down. And it doesn't bode well for the future. And I'm not a doom and gloomer, my friends, you know me. But you should understand the risks that are being presented by this new way of looking at the world. Because they are significant risks. And I don't know that the three major powers have thought through all these risks. I mean, the Chinese probably have. They think through things a lot. The United States is certainly not thinking of the long-term risk at all. They're moving too quickly and tactical maneuvers way too quickly without thinking through the long-term strategy. And so having a spheres of influence strategy, okay, that's a long-term strategy. At least that's something you can identify and say, this is our strategy. We're going to control the Americas. Not directly, but you know what? The Trump administration might say, and again, think about what they've done. They want to grab Greenland. They've talked about grabbing the Panama Canal. They've grabbed the oil out of Venezuela, and they've talked about taking over Canada. This is a sphere of influence move. All these things are like, no, this is our territory. Don't mess around here. We play by our own set of rules in our sphere, and nobody better mess with our sphere. And that it would include, perhaps in the future, if this persists, that the United States would say, hey, Brazil, you're not allowed to trade with Russia and China anymore. Or we might put billion% tariffs on you, or we might militarily invade you. Again, I'm not suggesting these things are going to happen. I'm playing through the logic of this. If you're going to go for this attitude or idea that the United States is the now controller of all the Americas, from Greenland down to Tierra del Fuego, then they might initiate strategic or tactical moves like tariffs and or trade blockades or any number of things in order to get what they want from their long-term strategy. But here are the risks to this. One, again, while it might prevent World War III, because the major powers will not want to mess with each other, the drawbacks are as follows. All small states and even medium-sized states lose sovereignty, period. There's no such thing as sovereignty in the world as we have recognized it since 1945. The likely first countries that will utterly lose their true sovereignty, I would argue Venezuela's already lost it. Ukraine will be perhaps a victim if they lose the war. Well, if you lose the war, certainly. But then that might spread to other Eastern European countries if Russia feels so empowered. In our part of the world, Venezuela, to me, has already lost sovereignty. Cuba, I believe, will probably be the next to lose sovereignty. The United States has pined for decades to get Cuba back, and not just Donald Trump. I mean, you remember the whole Bay of Pigs thing. That was Kennedy back in the day. So the U.S. has long been perturbed by Cuba being a communist state, if it even can be called that anymore. And I think it's likely there'll be moves against Cuba's sovereignty, maybe sooner than later. We've already talked about Greenland. Again, Trump is currently threatening 100% tariffs on Canada. For what? Because Canada just struck a trade deal with China, and that made President Trump angry. And you're like, well, but that's a different country. Yes, but he considers Canada in his sphere of influence, and he doesn't want Canada trading with China. So again, I don't know how far this is going to go, but this seems to be the modus operandi right now. This is how they're thinking, and this will help you interpret and predict their future moves. At least I hope it does. Russia, obviously, if they get Ukraine, will probably try for the Baltic states, even though they're NATO members. China will certainly take back Taiwan soon, but will also be pushing perhaps to gain some more territories in the South China Sea, maybe by force. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is tying countries to their tether with debt. So China goes out and gets a lot of countries, builds big projects for these countries, like a big port facility in Sri Lanka. The Chinese built this huge port facility, cost millions or billions of dollars. And they did this in strategic partnership with the sovereign state of Sri Lanka. Then 5 minutes later, Sri Lanka couldn't afford to pay the bills, and China came back in and said, well, that's ours now. You just defaulted on this, so this giant port facility might be in your country, but it's ours. That is another strategy that China will be doing to expand its sphere of influence. And that can happen in Southeast Asian countries, South Asian countries, and all the way through perhaps big chunks of East Africa. And the second big problem with this return to... Oh, I'm almost done. I only got 2 more points, and then I'll stop for comments. The second big problem with this return to spheres of influence model is that everybody with any sense will be rearming out the wazoo. If you really think that might makes right again and there is no more international rules and regulations, then every country that's smart will try to get a nuclear weapon. I would. If I was Iran, I would have been doing everything in my power to get a nuclear weapon since the first Trump administration. Because the U.S. under Donald Trump no longer cares about international norms and rules and regulations, and they don't like you. If I was any country that the Chinese hated, like Taiwan, or that the U.S. hated, like Iran or Venezuela, or that Russia hated, which is everybody, I would be worried right now if we're returning to a might makes right model between these 3 powers. And I would try to get a nuclear weapon, because a nuclear weapon does something that your army can't do. Your army will lose to Russia. Your army will lose to the United States. But a nuclear missile in your backyard that you can launch at them will prevent them from trying to defeat your army. So it is a very good way to get people to not mess with you. I look for, if this persists, I look for a big rearmament to happen on planet Earth, and it's already happening. Not just nuclear weapons, but the whole European group. All of EU countries are being tasked with rebuilding their militaries because they can't rely on anybody anymore. So you're getting massive rearmament across Europe, and the Chinese are just now starting to ramp up to try to catch up with the United States for battleships, for aircraft carrier, for nuclear weapons. They're nowhere near the United States, but they're damn skippy going to try to catch up, because they don't want to be dominated in a confrontation. And Russia, of course, never gave up trying to get more and more weapons. So you have a world where the big powers are ramping up their armaments, and the middle powers and small countries better damn well step it up, or they will be trampled over themselves. So that's very problematic. And by the way, these things cost money. The last thing I saw from the Trump administration was they're pushing in the budget to spend $1.7 trillion, trillion with a T, $1.7 trillion in the next 25 years to upgrade the U.S.'s nuclear arsenal, which is already the second biggest on planet Earth. That's just the nukes. That's not anything else. 1.7. The other thing to consider here is a lot of these leaders, Putin is the exception, but a lot of the current leaders in power now have never been in a war. They never served in a war. They never served in the military. They never learned the battle-hardened scars of why war sucks. And I've increasingly seen this in the U.S., and possibly this is happening in China and Russia too. But enough people, I believe, are now starting to think that a nuclear war is survivable. And everybody with a half a brain in the scientific community will tell you that is preposterous. Oh, we'll just build bigger bunkers and we'll be fine. No, you won't. Nuclear war is the end of the species. It's certainly the end of civilization as we know it. And there's been enough folks who've been significantly terrified about that since World War II, since atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, since kids used to have to duck and cover under their classroom desk during drills about nuclear war during the Cold War. People used to be rightfully scared. Does everybody remember any of the cool doomsday post-apocalyptic movies that used to come out? One was called The Day After, and it was about what happens at an actual nuclear war in a small town in the United States. It was terrifying. People were terrified. I think that came out in the 80s. I'm bringing this back up because people are forgetting. People are forgetting. And you have leaders like Xi and Trump in particular who've never served a day in the military, have never personally sacrificed anything physically. Again, no offense to you Trump fans. He didn't serve in the military. Who've never been to war. And so war seems much more doable for people that have never done it. And the general populations are starting to forget how bad this will be for everybody too. So that is another big worry of mine of this return to spheres of influence between major powers where might makes right. This is, in general, a much more dangerous situation because the third and final thing, or was it the fourth and final thing, is if there are no more rules and there is no international consensus that invading your neighbor's territory is bad, and if you invade your neighbor's territory like Saddam Hussein did, that the world is going to come and prevent you from doing it, if that's off the table, then the hell with it. I'm in Cambodia. Let's invade Thailand. Oh, wait a minute. That already happened. Oh, I'm in Eritrea. Let's invade Ethiopia. Yep, that already happened too. So everybody's invading the Democratic Republic of Congo. I mean, that place is a shitstorm. It's a multinational war has been occurring in Congo for a decade or two, and no one even knows about it. This is going to become a standard. And so why wouldn't a country be like, well, Kazakhstan, well, Tajikistan's right there. Let's take it. Ain't nobody going to do anything about it. So we are likely to see not only armament on a large scale for all countries, and particularly the big powers and the middle powers, but even smaller states might be encouraged just to go grab stuff. So this is a problem when the world gives up on the rules and regulations that the United Nations built to prevent this very type of conflict at all levels, small scale all the way up to large scale. And with that, my friends, that's the end of my 1 hour, and of course it went 2 hour talk on what spheres of influence are. And by the way, you might have heard about this a bunch. I wrote a whole chapter for the 13th edition of the book about this very concept. And I wrote that 2 years ago. And I've seen it with increasing frequency in the news. Spheres, with talking heads and political analysts and military analysts talking about this is like a spheres of influence thing. Some people say that's nonsense. It's not a spheres of influence thing. But I just look at facts and what's going on. I'm like, sure looks like it to me. But I've already spoken far too long. So let me wrap that up and get back to your questions and comments. But how far back should I go? Because
Just short.
Just short. I see. I see you jumping in there, Katie. So I'm back to D. Scar, who says, "What percentage of his transactional trade goes to the Trumps?" Just curious. That I don't know about. That's what we would call that corruption. And I don't know anything about the numbers, but it does appear that the Trump establishments and businesses do benefit directly from some of these things. Again, sorry to your Trump super fans, but it's pretty open. I mean, it's not really secret that he is getting things for his companies or even for his kids from some of this transactional stuff. Quixote says, imagine thinking they actually have a long-term strategy outside anything other than flooding the zone. Yeah, that's could be another reason why they do so much wacky stuff to keep people busy. That is a theory that's been espoused a lot. Castle Guard says, do you think Putin's actions in Ukraine has made it easier for Trump to threaten taking over countries like Canada and Greenland, or do you think Trump's rhetorical rhetoric emboldens Putin more because he can point at the U.S. doing the same, or both? Yes. Well said, Castle. It is both. And by the way, I don't think U.S. President Trump has looked at Ukraine and said, yeah, I'm going to do that. I don't think Ukraine entered into his mindset at all. I think he came to the second term and possibly even in his first term under the again, very realpolitik attitude of why doesn't the U.S. use its military to do more stuff? If we're complaining about this guy, Nicolas Maduro, for 10 years, 20 years, why don't we just go take him out? Again, because we were in a different system of rules and regulations internationally based on values systems of the U.S. government for individual human rights and liberal democracy. And so we let those values determine our long-term strategies, and the Trump administration simply is not burdened with that. Again, not a judgment call. I think Donald Trump would completely agree with that. It's like, no, I don't think about that. He said outright, no, we don't want U.S. military bases all over the world. We don't want the U.S. as the world's policeman. It's not our problem. I mean, he has stated it very clearly. And so no one should be surprised when he takes the realpolitik situation and says, why wouldn't we just take Greenland? It's part of our sphere of influence. And he can make up any number of reasons why, specifically why tactically they want it. But the long-term strategy, remember, that's what this lesson's about, tactic versus strategy. They've done all sorts of tactics. It can name lots of tactical reasons to take Greenland. But I think it's because their long-term strategy is to control the sphere. And their sphere is North America, South America, and all the America in between. And so I don't know that Trump really paid attention to Putin's moves in Ukraine, and maybe not even China's ambitions on Taiwan. I think the Chinese and Russian leaders are now looking at Trump saying, if he's just taking territory, then he got nothing. He can't say shit about what we're doing. And that is perhaps true. But no, one never knows with U.S. President Donald Trump. He could come out tomorrow and be like, no, I don't think they should do that, even though I'm doing it. I got several hundred heads from Lisa Lasita. Welcome back into the chat room. TJ Wagnon back in the hizzle. Welcome back, TJ says, could the threats towards Canada just be a strategy to make other NATO countries build up their military and in the long run help contribute more if stuff hits the fan with Russia or China? Good point, TJ. And I think that some of the strategists in the Trump camp would actually point to that. And they would say, yes, our hardline stance of suggesting openly that we don't need NATO, they need us, and pressing those folks is making them stronger, and that's our strategy. I'd be more than willing to accept that, except no one's outlined it. So at worst, it's a unintentional strategy that I think's not terribly bad. Is it an intentional strategy? I don't know. The way that they present things and piss off everybody, it doesn't seem intentional, but it could be. But well played. I like that. And back to TJ, with the current presumption being that several NATO countries aren't contributing as much in terms of military power, knowing the U.S. would come in and save them if anything would happen. Yes, and that has been Donald Trump's argument literally since his first term. He has been outright saying, no, NATO countries have to pony up more because stop relying on us all the time. The Trump administration, during even the first one, but currently they still say this, is like, look, dudes, you know why Norway and Denmark and all these Scandinavian countries have free health care and have this great standard of living? Because they don't got to spend no damn money on defense, because they're relying on us to defend them. Now, again, I'm not saying I think that, but I've heard it espoused in many policies and many folks in the Trump administration of like, yeah, these guys get to get off scot-free under our defense umbrella, and we're going to change that. Again, not a terrible strategy if it was perhaps done a little nicer. It would be a quite great strategy if it was done treating these folks more as true allies as opposed to people you want to literally throw off a moving truck. But we'll see. Sean Agan says, this all seems likely discussion the first time T met with all of them his first term.
I was on Facebook. Trump.
Yes, that Trump met with all of them, the other leaders. Yes, I agree. Whether it was the Trump meeting with the NATO leaders or Trump meeting with Putin or Xi, his other world power rivals. I would say yes, a lot of this stuff was already discussed first term. Blasphemous Red says an updated lecture for China is long overdue. Yes, it is. A blasphemy. I will get on that. I'm actually thinking about redoing all the world regional lectures and recording them and actually playing them online and then being there to answer questions while you watch the lecture. Wouldn't that be fun? Spac Jarrow says Greenland is already has a couple of U.S. bases there. They have one, and I've been to it when I was in the U.S. Coast Guard. We resupplied that station. It's called Thule or Thule, way up north. But the U.S. has the diplomatic mission and or a treaty already in place to build as many as they want. I say as many as they want. I don't know if there's a number. I've not read that treaty, but the treaty's been there since World War II. So the and during World War II, the United States had a dozen bases. They could easily kind of revamp those. I mean, they're probably all dilapidated and gone now, but they already know strategically where's the best places for bases. They already had them. So the U.S. could easily tomorrow start building bases, and I'm kind of predicting they're gonna. I'll throw this down. It's still January. I think there'll be a new U.S. military base in Greenland before this year is out, and maybe more than one. You heard it here first. Spac Jarrow said, stand corrected. The only base in Greenland is the Pituffik Space Base operated by U.S. Space Force. Yes, Pituffik is the new name for it. It used to be called Thule. Blasphemous says, Fallout 2028. Bam! Fallout, the video game. It's about to become canon. I don't know what it means, but I love it. Oreo Cadester, good screen name, says, a new era of colonialism. Indeed, Oreo. Indeed. It's neo-colonialism. 21st century neo-colonialism is right around the corner, if not happening already. And again, back to sphere of influence. These big powers are going to say, we're going to take over this colony. It's in our sphere, so don't mess with us. And we won't mess with you when you take back over Taiwan. Castle says, would you consider Putin has already been taking over countries by proxy, i.e. Belarus, by propping up their pro-Russian leadership? Yes. Yes, I totally agree with Belarus. My mind is trying to think if there's any other places similar to that. There is no other countries that are as directly under the influence of Russia as Belarus. However, it's well documented, and you all probably know that Russia spends a lot of time and a lot of money influencing elections in Eastern Europe and Europe in general to put in pro-Russian candidates, to put in right-wing candidates, no less. And so they spend a lot of time trying to get more influence into those democratic societies. But no other country, I would say, is under their thumb just as of yet, but they're working on it. Let's see. Billy Bob says, if there are no more rules, does that mean intellectual property is up for grabs? That's a very good question, Billy Bob. If there ain't any more rules and nobody cares about enforcing anything on the global scale, then yeah, steal away. Steal all you want. There's no such thing as patents anymore. There's no such thing as royalties anymore. Actually, I just read an article, because I've written several books. I read an article about if you've ever written a book, AI has already stolen it. And it's like already a well-documented chain that everybody's just grabbing printed works and claiming them as their own and actually printing them and selling them with slight modifications through AI. So I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. So long royalties, but I never really got any anyway. I just never sold that many Plaid Avenger books. But Billy Bob, I like that. Intellectual property, there'll be no rules on that. And by the way, pharmacies stand to lose a lot because people won't give a shit about copyrights and trademarks on drugs. Much less books, much less technology, much less anything else. So yeah, that's a big economic hit that's going to happen. Jim McCloskey says, I just found this. Too late. No worries, Jim. It's recorded. It'll be posted up as soon as we finish. Oreo Cadester says, you have a new edition of your book. Would love to get a hold of one again. Just email me, Oreo. I can mail you one, although I do have to charge you some money for the postage because it's a big fat book.
The 13th edition is not out
The 13th
yet.
edition, I don't even know when
We
it.
published that chapter ourselves.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think we're just going to start publishing ourselves. But AI is going to steal it all anyway, so we might as well publish ourselves. So we're working on it, Oreo. And in fact, if you email me, I will put up the whole chapter on spheres of influence. So that's what I had already done the research on that for the book for the 13th edition, and I kept hearing more about it. That's why I did this podcast right now. So I've got that new chapter, but I need to start rewriting the book for ourselves and just posting it online through the Plaid Avenger website. If any of y'all are really smart coders and whatever you call folks who do that stuff nowadays, we really need to monetize. We need to dust off the Plaid Avenger website because we've never made money on it. We've never allowed advertising. It's so old school, and I want to keep it that way. It's retro. Go look at plaidavenger.com. It's so retro. But if any of y'all want to help us start using that site to monetize, maybe even put up classes there so where you could actually take quizzes again, because we're going to put the World Regions class back up there for people to take whenever they want, but and it'll be fun to do quizzes. But we're also going to put the wine class back up there, and I'm going to create a new whiskey class, and it would be fun to do it up on the Plaid Avenger site because it's so retro. But if anybody can help monetize it or fix it so that we can sell stuff on there, that'd be fun. Not that I care about money, but you need some to keep going. I would love to give people free shit all the time, but I gotta mail it to you. It costs money. Let's see. SPAC says, I too would like one. Can it be personally signed by you? I'll do my best. Matthew Kennedy up in the Hizzle says, haven't China and Russia been increasingly acting in violation of these global organizations and rules anyway? Well, everybody breaks the rules. Okay, there's no clean actors on the world stage. The United States breaks the rules all the time. Even at the height of us promoting these rules, we would go against economic trade stuff that we helped establish, and we've done nefarious things, and we've helped topple leaders of countries. And I don't know if you're referencing something specific, and your follow-up, Matthew, was, so this could be a way to track and strong-arm them with a massive sphere of influence. Yes. The thing I should have pointed out, and I alluded to it, but I didn't highlight it. The thing that's most different about a spheres of influence world is that right now, again, for the last 80 years, you've had a singular group of a singular set of rules. Again, United Nations. I'm just going to abbreviate United Nations shit that everybody kind of agreed to. All right, everybody was a member. Everybody, even the Vatican, except the Vatican City, I think, but everybody, even the bad acting countries like North Korea, were members. And so there was a set of rules kind of for the globe. They got broke a lot, but in general, people said there's a set of rules. Spheres of influence is very different because each sphere has its own rules. And the United States will dictate what's going to happen in its sphere of influence. And again, these are semi-hypotheticals. I'm predicting a little bit. If the world embraces this, and this is what's going to happen for the next 50 years, then the United States might set trade policy for all the Americas. I don't know how it would work, but they might. And China's going to say, look, this is militarily our sphere. Get out. No one's allowed to come into it without our permission. You can do that economically, you can do that physically, you can do that militarily, and you can do it for legal systems. So the United States might say, hey, no one else can, everybody else can cheat and lie and steal on our copyright stuff, but we will enforce copyright infringement laws within our sphere, and we'll come after you if you... Hey, Argentina, if you start stealing medical patents, we're going to come get you. China can steal them. There's nothing we can do about that because that's a different sphere. So you understand how big of a difference that is from a global system that everybody kind of paid attention to spheres that have their own internal systems. And the EU is a very good example. I mean, they already have the European Union. They already were doing this, but in a good way. They were still engaged in the world, but they were already saying, well, here's our set of rules for trade here. The United States might establish that for the Americas. China might establish that for all of the kind of neo-colonial ambitions of taking over surrounding territories, maybe like in Southeast Asia. So there's no knowing where this goes. But your question was, are Russia and China been breaking these rules anyway? Well, certainly Russia broke the sovereignty rule by invading Ukraine. But China, I would keep an eye on. China actually was a big beneficiary of the global norms and rules of the last 80 years. China would not be as rich as it is without the global standards that helped make it rich. China likes order. China prefers order over chaos. Trump prefers chaos over order. There's no bones about that. China prefers order. And so China will likely step up as a player that tries to maintain the global rules and regulations while still also breaking them here and there in their sphere of influence. So they want what they want, but they become a much more important player on the world if they are seen as the new U.S. that is standing up for a singular system and is standing up for sovereignty for all current countries. They might not do it because, again, they're going to want Taiwan back, and they might want some other things. But they still might step up and say, hey, the singular set of rules, maybe we're going to become the greatest advocate of that, and other countries will respect and like us for that. And if the United States pulls out of the United Nations, that leaves China as the strongest player still in the game. So you're going to see China, I believe, take over a lot of the international organizations that the United States is stepping back from. And that helps cement what we call soft power. The current administration, maybe that's next. What do you guys want to talk about next week, by the way? It's already 10. We've already gone 2 hours. What would you like to talk about next Sunday? It could be soft power. And here's the teaser for that. There's soft power and there's hard power. I'll bet you already know the difference between the two. However, who believes in what? I think it's pretty obvious that the current administration of the United States does not believe in soft power. They only believe in hard. Every previous administration has believed in both. China might favor soft power over hard in the future. So what do those terms mean? That might be a whole nother lecture we do next week. Let's see. Restream says, congratulations. You've received 100 messages today. Let's see. Spat Jero says, oh yeah, Thule was named to Pitufik. Castleguard says, true, maybe Orban in Hungary. Wasn't sure if any of the stands counted in this. Yeah, the stands are kind of independent, but they are weaker states. So Russia, if it has a resurgence, which is problematic, by the way. I've said this before, China and Russia have problems aplenty. So don't take this little talk as, oh, they're the major powers and they're going to conquer the world. No. I'm just saying this is an attitude that the world seems to be moving towards. Doesn't mean it's going to be successful for everyone. Russia is in significant economic trouble. China has significant troubles around its economic future. So this isn't all cut and dry, all right? Anything can still happen. We're just talking about how the world is working structurally and strategically right now. Orban in Hungary certainly loves Russia, but I wouldn't say that Hungary is in its direct orbit. It might be, but not yet. R Cover C is thrown in a last-minute Velociraptor head. Thank you for that, R Cover C. Let's see. Matthew Kennedy, I was mostly alluding to intellectual property. And Jero says oil tankers. And Gumble says a few questions for you. What daily news podcast do you listen to? I like Breaking Points. Check them out if you haven't. I've not heard of that, so thank you, Gumble. I will check that out. Katie, remind me to check out Breaking Points. I don't listen to any podcast in particular. I still read. I just read a lot of news stories. Read a lot of news from global sources, just like I did back in the day. Read Foreign Affairs, which is a periodical magazine. Read opinion pieces from virtually all news sources in America, left and right. And what else do I read? The Economist. So, yeah, I still do a little bit of everything from everywhere. Second question. Can you explain why military involvement with Iran is considered such a big deal? How and why does that differ from any other country? Seems like people freak out more with Iran. Yes. That feels like a whole other podcast too, because that is a multi-layered answer. but you have the spirit of the question is correct. Iran is different. Iran is a sizable population. Iran is a highly educated country. Iran has been in political turmoil for 20 to 30 years. Iran is a pariah state within the Middle East because of ethnic and religious differences. So most other countries in the Middle East are Arab and Sunni, while Iran is Persian and Shia. Iran used to be a global power, particularly way back in the day during the world of Alexander the Great. Remember, Alexander the Great, his whole mission was to go beat the shit out of the Persian Empire, which means there was a Persian Empire. So Iran is a country with a long and proud history that their people know. They have a very strong sense of self, of nationality, of ethnicity, of history, of honor, and those are people that don't go down easily. So that's a very short answer. There's lots of other reasons. But to mess with the Iranians is to open up a can of worms that is not easily contained. They've already had wars within the Middle East with neighboring countries. And from a United States or European perspective, they have the capability, the capacity, the knowledge to have a nuclear weapon. I bet they really wish they had one now. And so they're different, if that makes sense. They're different for a lot of different reasons. And not the least of which is you also don't want to see another round of a Western country attacking a Muslim country. No good can come of that. So everybody has to kind of tread lightly when it comes to Iran on multiple fronts. And the last comment is from Stacy Brown Brinkley, who I went to school with since kindergarten, who says, every time you say strategic, I hear strategery. Strategery, I believe, was coined by the second Bush, by W. I believe truthiness and strategery, I believe, were, if they weren't former President George Bush, then they were, it was Will Ferrell as former President George Bush. Okay. Yes. Comment from the, what? Instagram.
iPad in front of you. LA Patty says hi. Lots of wine class.
L.A. Patty.
LA Patty.
Awesome. Patty from L.A., I assume.
Says wine class whiskey. Then C Moto say class of
C Moto.
C Moto class of 2012.
Class of 2012 C Moto. Welcome. And welcome, Patty.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you both. Thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. I have a great time doing this, and so I will, as always, encourage you all to email me. It's the same as it's been since they invented email, JOBOYER @vt.edu, and email me with your comments, questions, words of support, and mostly future topics you'd like to hear about, and any feedback on other formats we should do, any recordings we should do, anything that we should produce. Give it all to me. And we'll, for now, keep doing same plaid time, same plaid channel. We'll return to Sunday nights, the Sunday night after supper plaidcast at 8 o'clock next Sunday. Maybe we should go for 7.
But Sunday's the better.
Sunday's better than Monday. And then,
Ask.
and yeah, and the last thing I'll ask you all is 7 o'clock, is 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or even 6 o'clock better on Sunday? Let me know in the comments and or the emails. And for now, as always, have a great week and party on. Party on.